Hi there, my name is Kay Moon, and I'm a Western astrologer and twin flame channel. And this is an astrology reading for the Scorpio new full moon, Scorpio full moon, occurring on May 18th, 2019 at 5:12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, according to my software. In this chart, you'll see that we've got the sun sitting opposite the moon in Taurus. Here's the sun at 27 degrees and 39 seconds. Here's the moon here in the sign of Scorpio at 27 degrees and 39 seconds. This is a very interesting moon with some very interesting symbols. As you may be aware, full moons tend to be about culminations or completions or things coming to a head before transformation and dissemination and dissolution, while new moons are about new beginnings, ripenings, openings, things that are coming forth into the world. With a Scorpio full moon, which happens every year right around this time, the full moon, again, being about those endings, those ripenings, things coming toward completion. In the sign of life, death, and rebirth, there is an interesting symbolism here, especially with this Scorpio full moon being at the very tail end of the sign of Scorpio, representing culmination in and of itself. There's some interesting symbol here around death, completion, the end of a cycle, the end of an era. And that's pretty significant energy to be walking into this full moon with, especially with this full moon sextiling the ruler of Scorpio, which is now retrograde in Capricorn, Pluto. With that kind of 30, 60, yep, a sextile. Capricorn represents systems, institutions, banks, big business, taxes, and legacy. It also represents hard work, work ethic, the things that we would work for. And with Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, sextiling this full moon, the energy, one of the energies in signature with this full moon has to do with it's a in the shadow. Let's talk about it in the shadow and the light, because the symbols never play out in just one way. It depends on how you're walking through life. If you're walking through life in such a way where the symbols can play out at their highest good for you, then they will. If you're walking through life in such a way where the symbols are prepared to bring forth a karmic lesson, they will. So with Pluto retrograde, anytime you have a planet going retrograde, two things could be true of it. The first thing is that the more spiritual aspect of that planet can come forward. With Pluto retrograde, we're looking at the spiritual aspect of transformation. In the shadow, however, or in the, rather than spiritual, the mundane aspect, what we're looking at is the illumination under the light of the full moon of covert operations that have perhaps been occurring within systems, within governments, within institutions, banks, etc., that are now being slightly exposed. So we've got Saturn retrograde as well, Saturn being the symbol of the restoration of integrity, time, chronos, Saturn also being the separator. We've also got Pholus retrograde, Pholus being a symbol talking about sacrifice, almost sacrifice in terms of being collateral damage, being caught up in someone else's mess, and then you having to pay the price for having been in the wrong place at an unfortunate time. And then we've also got Chariklo retrograde, Chariklo being the divine intercessor. After her son had lost his sight, after the goddess that she worked with cursed him, she interceded on her son's behalf. And while he didn't get his sight back, he did get the ability to see without eyes. And then we've got Jupiter retrograde, not in Capricorn, but in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius really being about truth, the ideals that we strive toward, and our hopes, our optimisms, our dreams, long distance travel, religion as well, like the letter of the law. And so with Jupiter, the sign of expansion, hope, and optimism going retrograde in Sagittarius, it's almost like those things are hidden, while these heavier energies in Saturn are starting to play out under the light of this full moon in Scorpio. I want to take a moment here to acknowledge some of the things happening in United States current events. I understand that some of my listeners, thank you for watching from across the world. I see the analytics and I know where you're watching from, and I'm appreciative that you would pay attention and watch. But I'll address my United States viewers since that is where I live, and the majority of you also live here with me. This week has been an interesting week as it pertains to decisions having to do with women's bodies. You'll see this chart has a strong earth signature, all of this in Capricorn and all of that in Taurus. And some very public legal decisions being made in some of the states pertaining to choices women make about having children or not, whether to have an abortion or not. All of it is represented here in this astrology. So I'll walk through some of that and then tie it to some of the more individual aspects of life so that you can see how all of this is playing out. But as you can see, with all of this Capricorn energy, this stack in Capricorn has to do with institutions, with government. And with these heavy karmic hitters retrograde, Pluto, Saturn, retrograde in Capricorn, there is a bit of exposure of things that aren't quite working the way the general public or general population. There's an exposure of strife in the system. There's an exposure of ways in which the system is a little bit broken at this time. Now, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, it's neither here nor there in terms of this reading. What's being exposed here is the conflict, the fact that there isn't yet in place a system that thoroughly takes into account all the people with all of their thoughts in a way that serves them all equally and well. And with all of these, with that retrograde energy here, including the South Node, and I'll show you in a minute the chart of the Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, which talked about, for those of you who are international to the United States, it ruled that a woman's ability to have an abortion is a private matter, and that states' interference or states' mandates around that private matter is unconstitutional. And so you'll see in a moment how all of this brokenness in the system is being exposed and sits right on top of the reversal of that decision at this time. So the next thing here, Scorpio also represents sex, death, and taxes. But Taurus in opposition represents fertility. Taurus represents life and that which is life-giving. It represents sensuality, whereas sexuality specifically the transformation of two into one, is what Scorpio is about. So inside of Taurus, we've got the Sun, we've also got Mercury, we've got Venus and Uranus conjunct. Sun conjunct Mercury represents communication, and communication that's been illuminated for all to see and all to hear about these subject areas. We've got Venus conjunct Uranus. Uranus has already been in the process and about the business of breaking up stagnant earth energies. So, of the earth energies and the stagnation, and like Taurus is the fixed, the earth, it's both fixed and earth sign. It is the stubbornest of the stubborn zodiac signs. And with Uranus coming for a nice long 14-year stay in the sign of Taurus, we can all expect some changes as it pertains to this area related to fertility, sensuality, fosterage of growth, money. Taurus definitely represents money in a really big way. And self-esteem. Interestingly enough, Taurus also represents self-esteem. So with Venus conjunct Taurus at the time of this particular full moon, we could have expected Venus being the sign of the female. You'll see it looks like that female symbol you might see on restroom doors. You can expect that we're hearing, that's communication, Sun, Mercury, about some changes as it relates to women, pertaining to sexuality specifically, things having to do with sex, having to do with death, etc. In some places in the world, this may have to do with things pertaining to taxes, inheritances, institutional, like estates, etc., like that, because Scorpio also represents money and income from others, grants, loans, tax returns, etc., inheritances. So changes to those kinds of things also having to do with women. Fascinatingly enough, at this time, we also have this configuration out here in Pisces. This is an interesting configuration, and it's coming into culmination over the course of this year as Lilith moves toward Nessus and towards Neptune. Lilith, in the astrological mythology, represents the first wife of Adam. And as she's written about, to give you guys the short story, she's talked about as the symbol, or as the first wife of Adam. God gave her the same deal he gave Eve. You'll work with Adam, you'll have his babies, you'll stay in the garden, you won't eat that fruit, and this is your lot, take it or leave it. And she said, leave it. I'm out. I'm not doing this. She left the garden. We never heard from her again in the creation stories. The Lilith choice is the choice having to do with, I'd rather have nothing than this. And Lilith has just entered into Pisces, the sign of the cosmic oneness, the all, deep, deep, deep spirituality, intuition, and the subconscious mind. Nessus here is the obsession asteroid. So anywhere Nessus goes, our attention obsessively follows. And then Neptune here in its home sign of Pisces is bringing a deeper spiritual awareness and spiritual awakening. And it has been for some years now that it's in its home sign. It's bringing a deep spiritual awareness and spiritual awakening to all the beings on planet Earth. So what this speaks to for me is that brewing below the surface, there is a level of spiritual awareness, spiritual understanding, spiritual, almost with this Lilith here, a spiritual, this, I need it to go my way, and it's going to be my way or nothing. Watch this. So, and that energy also is sextiling this energy in late Capricorn. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the course of the year. I can assure you that whatever the thing that's happening now in your country or in your state, whether it's the recent decisions around abortion here in the United States or something else in your home country, whatever that thing is, we've not heard the last about that this year. There's going to be, not just this year, but in coming years, especially as these karmic planets start to go direct, Saturn and Pluto, and then Pholus and Chariklo, there's more to come. There's more to this story than what we're being shown. This has been in preparation for some time and is going to take quite some time to find final conclusion, whatever the situation is in your state or your home country. Interestingly enough, in addition to that, this energy out here in Taurus, moving off of that topic a bit, is speaking to some insights and illumination having to do with the feminine aspect of our lives. The aspects, especially with North Node out here in Cancer, combined with Juno, the partnership asteroid, and Mars, motivation, sitting out here in Cancer. That's another symbol that's tied to this energy that we just spoke about, Mars moving into Cancer, because Mars is the god of war. Moving into Cancer, Cancer having everything to do with nurturance and family, Cancer being the sign of Mars's fall. There was always going to be some level of some type of private upset made quite public, exposing fractures in a broken system at this time, given this symbology. So back to this out here in Taurus, Sun and Mercury, communication, Venus, all about the attraction point in a chart. Love and money, yes, but I've also noticed doing chart readings over many years that Venus just acts like a cosmic magnet. Where she goes, attention follows. So attention is on feminine bodies. That's the feminine earth sign of Taurus. The attention is on feminine sensuality. The attention is on changes as it pertains to these things. That's Uranus. Uranus, and this is a really good time to dive into the astrology of Uranus, because I've mentioned this in other videos. Uranus is stay in Taurus, but what there is to say about Uranus and the astrology and the mythology is this. Gaia created Uranus. She had given birth many years on her own without lover to the children of Earth. And there came a day when she said, you know what? I'm lonely. I would love a partner. And so she created Uranus. Less of a person, more of a place, as she is the earth, Uranus is the heavens. Uranus then and she lived together and created more children out of their bliss for many, many years until Gaia began to give birth to the 100-handed ones. And Uranus looked upon these children that he co-created with Gaia, and he said to her, oh, no, 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 no. These children are ugly. They are not allowed out. And he attempted to push them back inside Gaia and said, you will not give birth to these. And Gaia said, this is unacceptable. I created you and I created all these other children. You are not allowed to tell me what I can and cannot give birth to. So Uranus called out to her other existing children, one of the groups being the Titans, and she said, who among you will help me? Who among you will help me to put Uranus in his place? None of them volunteered except for Saturn. Saturn being Chronos, time. The disciplinarian is the reputation that he has, and the harsh teacher. This is why. When Saturn appeared before Gaia, he said, what is it you'd have me do? and she said, I want you to go up to the heavens to Uranus, and I want you to castrate him, and he will never be allowed to co-create with me again. And he said, all right, if that's what you want, that's what you'll have. He performed the task, and from his blood, as his blood hit the seas, sprang forth Aphrodite, so the mythology says, among other beings. But in addition to that, what also happened is Uranus separated from Gaia, and the heavens and the earth have been apart yet together from that day to this, so the mythology goes. And Saturn has now had the reputation of the separator. But what I also tend to think of him as is the restorer of integrity, where integrity is lost, where balance has been, or power has been abused. Saturn comes to create the restoration of that balance. And with Saturn retrograde at this time, energies flowing inward in a more hidden fashion, that checks and balances is a little bit hidden. It's within as opposed to out in the world. It's inside us when a planet goes retrograde as opposed to out in the world. So I'm sure you can take from that story much, much, much application to what we're seeing in the current moment. But what Uranus on his own, that story aside, before all of that happened, what Uranus really represents is the energy of the divine come down to co-create with the earth. Uranus is that way in which the divine has placed a spark and a seed within you that you might give forth that which is the combination of heavenly plus earthly. And with that occurring next to the sign of Venus, there is some call here for women, or change to what women are doing on planet Earth as it pertains to the way they give birth, or as it pertains to the way that they call forward energies from the divine. There's some level of transformation, some level of the divine meeting the earthly, the spiritual meeting the material, and a transformation occurring there, specifically as it pertains to women, because here's Venus under the light of this full moon, and Taurus being a very sensual, feminine sign. With the North Node out here in Cancer, what everyone is being called toward, whether, no matter which side of any argument that you are on, the motivation here is toward a concept of family, because that's Cancer. The motivation is toward a concept of family that reaches our highest ideals, that speaks to the image that we wish to become as a society. And that's Cancer, the sign of family, and the North Node, the karmic destiny that we're trying to take up and fulfill. That's the motivating and driving force for people's actions at this time. So keep that in mind as a spiritual being moving through the energies on the planet Earth at this time. What people are acting from is this call and this motivation, this drive, that's Aries, god of war, toward a more correct way, correct being subjective, toward a more quote-unquote correct way of expression of family. Here we've got the sign of partnership, Juno, sitting here with the sign of masculinity, ambition, drive, that's Mars, god of war. Interestingly, when I see Juno conjunct the North Node in this way, it lets me know that this is people are really trying to do this in a way that is working together, whether it looks that way or not, that is honoring family, no matter which side of the argument is on, that is honoring the partnership of women, no matter how you see it. That's the lens through which people's choices are being made. However, it's the fact that there's this broken system in place that's causing people to land on very different sides. Now, interestingly, what I love about some of this symbolism is that with the South Node sitting here in Capricorn as almost like a cosmic suction point, I like to think of it as a divine interstellar toilet, like a black hole almost. It's not that, but it can act that way when you've got this much energy going on, especially retrograde. It's almost vacuuming up lower expressions of this energy. But in order to vacuum them up, they have to come out first, just like in order to throw stuff away or give it to Goodwill, you got to take it out of your closets first. It can't stay in there. But that's such that you can see for what it is. You can create some discernment about where it's going and what you want it to be. And then you can have constructive discussions, constructive next steps in partnership with other people on the other side of the table to figure out what stays and what goes. How are we going to navigate this moment? So that's what I have for you on this Scorpio full moon. Keep in mind, everyone is moving through some type of healing this year as it pertains to their ambition, their dreams, their goals, their drive. That's Chiron here in Aries, and Vesta in Aries. That's what you consider holy, in Aries being about the self. But again, in order for healing to happen, you got to expose the wound. And that's a bit of what's happening at this point in time, is exposure of the broken places so that we understand where we need to come together to create healing. Thank you so much for watching this video, for liking and subscribing. If you'd like to know how these energies are playing out in your chart personally, you can email me at krysalismoon@gmail.com. That's KRYSALIS @gmail.com.